Fans are wrapped. 30-odd seconds remaining in this game. Perth heads through to the semi-finals. These two teams were in the semis last year. Now they'll take on the Kings. United season started with so much promise. It ends in disappointment in the play-in. And Perth continue on, chasing an 11th championship. The Wildcats are still alive in the NBL. Next up, the Sydney Kings. 95-77, the final score.
The Perth Wildcats, the final team to punch their ticket in the NBL26 Final Four. They join the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, the Adelaide 36ers, and of course the Sydney Kings as well. This is the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Kane Pittman and Olgun Ulic back together again, and we are ready for this Final Four to finally get going. Olgun, you are in Adelaide. Once again, we can see beautiful hotel curtains behind you, but it is very nice to see you, my friend. It's been a little sporadic for the both of us over the last few weeks, but now it's time to lock in for these semi-finals and beyond.
Don't put me into that camp, the both of us. Be sporadic for you, my friend. Shout out Kadee. Kadee was great last week. Brockhoff was good the couple of weeks before that. You, I think, made an appearance in the middle of that. But don't put this on me. This is all you. You went gallivanting around LA. I've been working.
Yeah, well, I was at All-Star Weekend, which obviously was fantastic. The time after that, I was traveling back to studio, so not much I could do. I could try a podcast from an airplane, but I don't think the quality would be the highest, so we didn't do that. Then last week, my mum was in town. It was my mum's birthday, and I thought about doing the podcast, but then I said, you know what? I don't see my mum enough, so I'm going to go hang out with her. We had a beautiful birthday dinner. I went to a hockey game. It was fantastic, so I apologize for not being here, but you're
on the podcast. Let everyone meet her.
No, she's had enough attention the last few weeks. She's been mentioned on TV a billion times. She's had a great time. They've left me. They have moved on to other destinations in the US, but it was great to have them around. But as you pointed to, you've done a great job with the pod. It's been really fun to actually listen to that and see some of the takes from obviously Rowdy and Jason Kadee and yourself. But we're going to lock in today. We appreciate everyone listening. If you're watching on YouTube, get in the YouTube comments. I know I've been absent a little bit, but I'm locking back in. So let us know what you think about this pod. We have got one thing to watch from every team across this semifinal series. We're going to ask, what do Melbourne United do now? They might be in for major changes over this offseason. They're disastrous finish to this year. So we'll talk Melbourne United, and then we've got a unique Dyson Daniels stat. If you're into unique stats, trust me, this stat is the one for you. But Olgun, let's get this thing going. And as I said, everyone get involved in the show. We appreciate you watching. Subscribe, follow, do all those types of things. But let's just talk about the play-in tournament real quickly here with the simple question, is it worth it? I don't think that we saw the highest standard of game these last three as we finally eventually get to the Final Four again. What do you think? Where are you at now, 4 years into this thing?
So 4 years, every season we've just had the top four teams advance, right? So
yeah,
from that perspective, it's not worth it, right? It's in effect a waste of time in that regard. Now, the problem is that's looking in hindsight. What the true value of the play-in tournament is the end of the regular season. So we're not having, four or five or six teams that are completely out of contention, and those games that they play don't matter really. Again, you're not playing for a draft. If you're a team that's playing, imagine you're in third seed, you're playing a team that's in seventh seed. They don't have a chance to make the playoffs or play in, and so that team doesn't really care anymore, right? They're incentivized to play their young players. They're not trying to win, and so all of a sudden, it'd be good to play those bottom 5 or 6 teams at the end of the season, because they won't be playing as hard because they have nothing to play for. So I think having something in place so there is something to play for as long as possible brings value to the regular season. Now, is there a way to expedite the process? Perhaps. I think the FIBA break is maybe a reason to think, can we have these playing games happen quicker? Is there a way for that to happen? Because there is still such a break. Again, we're going to talk about these teams. 36ers haven't played basketball in 15 days. The Sydney Kings are going to go 19 days without playing basketball. That's such a long time. It ruins momentum, not just for the teams, but for all of us involved. So there's a way to tweak it, to make it better. But I think getting rid of it, I think it ruins the end of the regular season, because we want these teams to feel like they're playing for something.
I think this was a pretty unique case. So you pointed to it. The top 4 teams have been there every single year. Funnily enough, the last 3 years, the 6th seed actually won that 5-6 game and went forward. So I think this year was a little bit unique just with how bad the bottom of the league was. So when you look at the winning percentages of teams, and admittedly, there were more games for the NBL, we had 5 teams this year with a 60% or higher winning percentage. In all the other years of the playing tournament, there's only been a max of 3 in 2 of those years, then only 2 teams one of those years as well. So there was a big gap between the top and the bottom. I think we saw that. I understand the case that it does stretch out, the regular season games, but I said it to you a number of times in this pod. No one was interested in watching really Illawarra, New Zealand, and Tasmania down the stretch. Part of it was health stuff. So I don't know how many people really tuned into that Melbourne United Tassie game looking for an all-time battle, but it's win or go home basketball. So I think that there is some added excitement there. And overall, I'm glad that we got the top 4 teams still here because they were the best teams in the regular season and they deserve to play a 3-game series. I'm cool with the playing tournament. I watched it. I'd be fascinated to know how much interest there was from non-fans of those teams. For neutral fans, is it really exciting? Or would you prefer to just play 5-game semifinal series? I think a lot of the times that would be the case for me. Get the best teams, play them over 5 games rather than having these one-off. But overall, it's not going to go anywhere. We understand that. Just like the NBA, the Ignite Cup that we had, NBL Ignite Cup in-season tournament, and then obviously the playing tournament. I don't think it's going anywhere, but it's interesting. This year, I think based on matchups and health, it perhaps wasn't the most exciting, but we have seen some pretty good games in the past. So, yeah, I think it's a safe bet to say that it's staying. I'd just be curious to know what the neutrals think, Olgs.
I just wonder if you could tweak it. I wonder if maybe you don't have a 6th team. Maybe it's just the 4 and 5 that play for it. There are situations where the only situation where there was a team that made the play-in that I think could have had a chance to win. Actually, they didn't make the play-in. It was Melbourne United a couple of years ago where they added Marcus Lee. They were the best team for the back half of the season. They didn't make the play-in because of that one DJ Vasiljevic shot in Perth that didn't go. If they had made the play-in, they probably could have had a stretch toward the end of the season and maybe made some noise. But even then, this is all just we're relying on hope at this point. And again, there's also something that's not fulfilling about 6 teams making the finals. Now, I don't count the play-in as making the playoffs. That doesn't count to me. The playoffs are when you're playing off, when you're with the top 4 teams. But there's something about 6 teams being able to make it. 60% of the league makes it through to the postseason. I don't know if I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you can make the case. The NBA, obviously, now with the 10 teams, so it's 20 out of the 30 if you include the play-in. So it is trending that way in world sports, really, and everyone's expanded the playoffs. Baseball expanded the playoffs. The NFL has expanded the playoffs in semi-recent times as well. So it is kind of the trend, and the league would probably argue that they're going to have expansion. So soon they would tell you that it will be 6 teams out of 12. I hope they don't expand it even further after that, but we'll see. But let us know your thoughts. But let's move on. We'll talk about Melbourne later. But Tassie Jack Jumpers, thanks for coming. I was very high on you, and I'm very upset that things didn't work out from a health perspective. But we know that you'll be back next season, and we can't wait for that with the Ant Army. But let's focus on the 4 teams that are still in it, starting with the Sydney Kings, who will play the Perth Wildcats. Of course, best of 3, game 1, Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. on ESPN. You understand that. Olgun, we set the task of one thing to watch from all of these teams. You put your hand up for the Sydney Kings. So what is one thing you are watching with the Sydney Kings team across this entire, possibly 3-game series?
So the Sydney Kings are in an interesting situation. They have beat the Perth Wildcats 3 times this season. They're 3-0 by 18 or more points every time. Yes, the Sydney Kings are the best offensive team in the league, the best defensive team in the league, have the best net rating, I think, in league history. They are a uniquely dominant team, but they go into a best of 3 series. All it takes is for a team to win 2 games, and the Sydney Kings are out. And so for the Sydney Kings, my thing is do no harm. And that means, yes, you have all the things that you're really, really good at. You push the pace, you play up, you pressure. But there are all those fundamental things that you need to lock in. For me, that's defensive rebounding, and that's not turning the ball over. Now, throughout the season, the Sydney Kings were the best defensive rebounding team, the best percentage, and they were the best turnover team in that they turn the ball over at the best rate, right? The least amount of times. They need to keep doing that. It's the whole Mark Daigneault broccoli and Skittles thing, right? The Skittles are there, and they're there for the taking. The Sydney Kings need to eat their broccoli because all it takes is for them to give an opening to the Perth Wildcats. They take it and they lose a game, and all of a sudden you're a game away from elimination. So in a series where sample size is out the window, you just need to eat your broccoli. Don't turn the ball over. Get defensive rebounds. And that's foundational enough, I think, for the Sydney Kings to do all the good things they do on top of that and win the series.
Eat your carrots as well for night vision. We know that. Kids out there that are listening to the Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. So game 1 is Wednesday night. Game 2 would be Saturday. Game 3 would be Wednesday if required next week. So, a few days rest in between, obviously, with the travel there. Olgun, the one question I have for you is a bounce back on the Sydney Kings. I think when you talk about the break that these two teams have had, so I think if you're a Wildcats fan, you're saying, well, okay, where is the optimism? Where do we bring hope to this series? Even though, as you pointed to, they've been absolutely dominated by this Sydney team, and I think it's a horrific matchup. And one of the things you say is, well, we've played 2 games in the last week. We've been battle-tested, and the Sydney Kings haven't. I think if you're Adelaide, the FIBA break, you're like, doesn't bother us. We need a circuit breaker. The Sydney Kings did not. Mm-hmm. Any concern with the game 1 sneak attack? We talk about this a lot.
100%. The Sydney Kings were the one team that did not need a break, let alone a 19-day break, because they had momentum. They were rolling. They won. Kane, they won 11 straight. So they won 17 of 19, 11 straight to end the season. Again, best net rating in, I think, league history, as far back as I can check the stats. They're again, a uniquely dominant team. They were rolling. The last thing they needed was for the league to say, hey, all right, let's take a step back. You get a 3-week break, and then we'll all revisit each other. The Perth Wildcats, by contrast, have just played 2 games. One of them they were not very good in. The second one they were fine in. But they've been a little bit battle-tested. They come in with a bit of rhythm. And the Sydney Kings have to figure out a way to manufacture their rhythm. Now, do I think they are a team that can manufacture energy out of nothing? Yeah. The Kings and the Phoenix are 2 teams I think that can do that. But this is where it gets a little bit scary. All of a sudden, the Wildcats come in with a bit of rhythm. Maybe they hit a couple shots. Maybe they jump out to a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-point lead. All of a sudden, the Sydney Kings tighten up, and they could lose a home game, and then all of a sudden their backs are against the wall in Perth at RAC Arena in a potential closeout game. So again, it's quite a scary prospect. The Perth Wildcats are coming to this game with rhythm. The Sydney Kings just necessarily don't have that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. The start of that game, if Sydney Kings come out hot, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, this could be concerning. For me, as we move to the Perth Wildcats, the thing that I'm watching for, and I think the thing that everyone will be watching for, is the ball security of this Perth team. And it's for a number of reasons. One, they were made to look like not an NBL 1 team. They were made to look like an NBL 3 team by the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix in that game a week ago. And there's not many times that I've heard a coach come out, John Rillie, post-game and say that Josh King was the MVP of the game. Can you recall a coach coming into a press conference and essentially saying, yeah, I got dominated by the opposition coach? Like, was that just me that I noted it down? I'm like, this is a very strange comment.
Yeah, I got crazy out-coached in that one. Yeah, I've never heard that before, man.
It was very bizarre. And I think if you're a Wildcats fan, you're sitting there and saying, well, how did we, or how were we so underprepared for the style of basketball that everyone knew the Phoenix were going to play? The difference for the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, and we'll talk about them a little bit more a little bit later here in the show, was that they really refocused and resharpened with a little bit of a break, and the intensity was elevated. But for Perth, we know they don't really have a point guard. So this has been the talking point all season long. But you have 17 turnovers in that Southeast Melbourne game. Ben Henschel, we know, really struggled to get the ball beyond half court. But then the other 2 guys who you essentially lean on to create all your offense, Doolittle and Windler, combined for 9 turnovers. Now, against Melbourne, it's a very different defense. They don't play the same way as Southeast Melbourne. They were able to cut down on the turnovers. Doolittle was unbelievable. He went from 5 turnovers to 0 turnovers, and they were just far too physical for that Melbourne United team. But my concern with Sydney is that when you look at the opposition turnover rate on the season, Southeast Melbourne is at the top, but then the Sydney Kings are right there underneath them. But the biggest difference is opposition free throw rate. The Phoenix, 39%, Sydney down to 26%. This Sydney team is more disciplined on the season in terms of defending hard and being the best defense in the league, but not fouling. They aren't over-aggressive like the Phoenix. And this is going to be a concern for Perth. They've been dominated by Sydney, and they have won games by their big men being far too physical, getting to the free throw line. They had 43 free throw attempts against Melbourne. It was one of the longest games I've ever sat through. It was painful at times. But I don't know whether they're going to be able to do that against this Sydney team. But if they can't take care of the ball, they're going to be in big trouble.
You could argue that the game against the Phoenix was good practice right? If
well, it's going to
you
have
can
to
see
be.
what this team's going to throw, but then on the flip side, you should have, like you said, you should have known that was coming. This team has an identity. We know that the Phoenix are going to pick up. They should know that the Sydney Kings are going to pick up full court as well. This is a team, they're the best defensive team in the league. This is a team that relies on their full court pressure. It was on Foxwell in that playing game. It is going to be McQuatch Malwatch all game. It's going to be Jalen Galloway. It'll be Torrey Craig. And then it's not just those guys. It's Xavier Cooks plugging gaps. It's the personnel is there. And so if you're the Perth Wildcats, I don't think you can leave Ben Henschel on an island. I don't think you can leave Elijah Pepper or David Duke Jr. on an island. I think you need to have an outlet guy, someone setting a terror screen. You have to help these guys out. And the thing, I don't think I want Christian Doolittle bringing the ball up consistently. I don't think I want that because he's going to be asked to do so much over that series. And I think if you ask him to do too much, it's similar to the way I feel the Phoenix are going to handle Bryce Cotton, which is if you turn him in the backcourt before you get into your offense, and then your offense is heliocentric around this guy, you have to preserve him. And I think this is a similar thing with Christian Doolittle. The idea of him being turned, bringing the ball up the floor, and then you got to get him the ball, and he's got to score it too. I feel like you can't put too much on his shoulders, otherwise you won't get the best out of him. But again, I don't know if the personnel's there, the ball carrying personnel's there for the Wildcats to get through that. I guess the key is trying to guard. If they've shown they can guard in stretches, if they can do that, get rebounds, push it, the Sydney Kings can set up their full court pressure, then I think they can be okay. So I feel like for the Wildcats, it all starts on the defensive end. Get stops. Don't let Sydney set up their defense.
Yeah, they've been probably underrated in the back half of the season to me when they've won a stack of games. Defensively, I think they've been pretty good. But this is really the question all season long, and I think it's been a frustration point for Perth Wildcats fans, particularly with the import situation and then not being able to find a replacement for David Duke Jr. And I know that he's back in the lineup now, but it always felt like they were going to get to this point of the season, and then it's like, oh, well, we can't really run offense. But Joe Lawala-Chul remains the biggest X factor for this team. You kind of think or believe, you know what Doolittle's going to do. He's a star. Windler, he's got to stay on the floor, and he's got to stop turning the ball over because he's had a bad couple of games here. They beat Melbourne either way, but JLA's only scored a total of 38 points against the Sydney Kings this year in 3 games. That's not enough. He's going to have to go crazy like he did a couple of nights ago. But I do think anything can happen. And who knows? But I would say if you just look at what we've seen this season, and then you look at the numbers a little bit deeper, there really is no explanation for anyone to have a pick in this series that is different from Sydney Kings winning 2 games. Like everything is telling you that's what this series should be. And anyone who's saying, oh, I think it could go to 3 or they're picking Perth, I don't know why. I don't think that there's any justification for that. But I hope it goes 3, and I hope we get a classic. It's just based on what we're seeing and all the evidence and all the numbers, it looks like a mismatch.
So I have a story on ESPN.com.au dropping today, previewing the semi-final series. And one of the questions I ask in it is, what is Perth's advantage? And it got to a point where I was thinking, and I don't know what it is. You can argue that maybe the front court depth, or at least the front court talent, JLA versus Tim Suarez, again, you can make that argument. But I asked around the league, I asked head coaches, I asked coaches around the league, what's their advantage? And the consensus was their advantage is that it's a 3-game series. And we've seen stretches where the Perth Wildcats can guard a little bit. We've seen stretches where they can go on heaters. Elijah Pepper can hit a bunch of 3s in a row. Henschel, Dylan Windler can do the same thing. Christian Doolittle can put points on the board in a hurry. So can Joe Lawala-Chul Jr. So there are stretches where they can put points on the board in a hurry. And if they can go and steal a game, then they can win a 3-game series. Because when it's 3 games, best of 3, sample size is out the window. You just have to win those. You just got to win 2. And so for the Perth Wildcats, they don't, again, on paper, there's no advantage that they have. The Sydney Kings are the better team. They've been the better team against them and then overall. So the advantage is you got to win 2 games. And anything can happen in 2 games. All it takes is a bad shooting performance from Sydney and things can change. A great shooting performance from the Perth Wildcats and things can swing their way. So it sounds patronizing. It's not meant that way. It's more just the Sydney Kings have been uniquely dominant. And where do the Perth Wildcats, where do they sit when it comes to where their advantage is in the series? And it's the fact that it's going to be a short series.
I think in my experience this year, the Red Army have been pretty realistic. Like, they've been pretty open and honest about where they think that this team sits. Now, of course, they go into this with hope, but I'd be fascinated to know what they are thinking heading into this series. So drop your comments. I want to move on to Adelaide and Southeast Melbourne, but just one real quick question I've got. Again, Red Army, please let us know. When they went to the wide shot in that game against Melbourne United, and that building looked like it was maybe 60% full, it's
a sea of
pretty
blue.
It's very jarring. And I'm curious. I've seen some stuff. I don't know the facts behind this, so I'm just saying what I've seen. Whether it's difficult to get tickets, whether season ticket holders don't have the advantages in the playoffs, whether it's just this fan base is frustrated with how things have gone with the roster and everything this year, I don't really know. But that was a Saturday night game, right? I'm not mixing up my days. So for that crowd to be so poor in a win or go home game, I'm just curious what's going on with the Red Army, man. Let us know. Let us know. Why was the crowd so bad? Tickets aren't cheap, I know that.
I agreed. Devil's advocate is short turnaround. And to decide to go to a game, sure. But by the same token, it could have been the last game of the season. Could be the last time you watch Jesse Wagstaff play, potentially. I'm not sure it is, but could be. So, again, weekend game. There was no other game to go to that week either. First game in Perth in a while. It felt like it was a must-go game, but again, there was a sea of blue seats among the Red Army. I found it fascinating too.
Yeah. So let us know. It was just something that I had noted down because it was bizarre. I was like, please, broadcast, don't go to the wide shot again. It's not a good look for these guys in this arena. Let's move on to Adelaide and Southeast Melbourne now. This game, you are in Adelaide a few hours away as we're recording this podcast. So if you don't get to listen to this, maybe you'll know what happened in game one, but this is what to watch throughout this entire series. Again, could potentially be a 3-game series. Game 2 also would be on Saturday. Adelaide, Southeast Melbourne would be the first game, and then the second game of that double dip would be Sydney and Perth from Perth. So, Olgun, you've got Adelaide. What are we watching from the Adelaide 36ers in this series here? Again, a team that's really struggled into this break they've had.
What I'm looking at is who from the non-Bryce cohort steps up, and how can they maximize those guys? We know what Bryce Cotton is. He will be rested. He has put up numbers against this Phoenix team over the course of the season. They're 2-2 over the season. They played 4 games. Bryce has averaged 25, 26 points over those games. He's done his job functionally. Who else steps up? How can you use Bryce Cotton and his level of play to maximize those guys? And I'm talking about, obviously, the 2 bigs in Zylan Cheatham and Isaac Humphries. They did a really good job maximizing them at the start of the season. That dropped off as the season progressed. Can they get back to that? Can they get back to involving those bigs a little bit more? You get the ball inside. Again, basketball flows way better. And can you use the attention that Bryce will presumably garner to maximize the shooters around him? So that's DJ Vasiljevic, John Jenkins, some of the bench guys. Can you do that? Because again, they haven't figured out a way to do that. It's been very Bryce forward, this team. It's force feeding Bryce. It's heliocentric around him. Is there a way to involve the other guys, not just through Bryce, but again, I said this to Kadee last week. Run a turnout play for DJ or for John Jenkins. Run sets for these guys. These are high-level players who can create advantages. And unfortunately, it seems like the 36ers recently have only lent on creating advantages for the singular guy, for Bryce Cotton. And yes, he is arguably the best advantage creator in the league. But there is so much talent on this team. And I think in order to go up against what can be a really good Phoenix defense, you need to be able to maximize all of the advantage creators on that roster.
It's interesting. So Bryce had 26-plus points in 3 of the 4 games. As you mentioned, he's been pretty good. He's had 6-plus assists in all of those, had 9 assists in the one game. He didn't score 26-plus. So he's been able to facilitate and certainly get numbers. It was really interesting to me, the longer, obviously we went on about MVP forever, and it was a great conversation and a great race for that award. But I found it fascinating early in the season when Adelaide were winning all these games, the conversation you would hear from 36ers fans is, man, look at our roster, look how dominant we are, we're star-studded, we're the best, we're this. And then the main argument I got from Adelaide fans around the MVP was, well, Bryce has to do it all himself. And I'm kind of looking at the roster and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. You mentioned all the stars they have on this roster. And Josh King was exactly right in a post-game press conference when they won through, when he said, hey, do not be fooled. Yes, they have Bryce, but and rattled off all the guys they have that you have. So they're well aware that they have other guys on this team that in the first half of the season were big-time contributors. Isaac Humphries had 21 points and 10 rebounds in a win over this team early in the season. Then the second time they won, I believe it was late November, off the top of my head, when DJ went crazy and they came back at John Kane Arena and he went nuts and they were able to win that game. So they have got guys. So I am fascinated, to your point, to see what these other guys can do. And this Phoenix defense at times can give guys opportunities. You can find gaps with this Phoenix team, despite the fact they were dominant against a Perth team that wasn't really equipped to attack that style of defense, which brings me to my point. What I want to watch with this Southeast Melbourne Phoenix team, and it's the danger of being too over-aggressive on the defensive side of the ball. So we know the way that they're going to play, but it is an incredibly taxing style of defense where you kind of got to be perfect, because if a team can either dribble through it or pass through it like the Perth Wildcats didn't do, you're able to find shots. And I thought it was really interesting as I was going through the shot charts for these two teams this year. And as we mentioned, it's 2-2. So Adelaide won the first two, Southeast Melbourne won the last two. But on the season, this is via Spatial Jam, the Adelaide 36ers have shot 36% of their shots at the rim against everyone on average on the season. 36%. So it's about average for the league if you're getting that percentage of shots. Against Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, that number jumps from 36% to 51% of their shots have come at the rim. And the efficiency hasn't really dropped. It's basically the exact same, which is really interesting to me because it tells me that Adelaide has had success getting into the paint and scoring against this team. I didn't go back and watch every game. Some of that I would assume is in transition because the Phoenix do play a really high tempo game of basketball. But I'm wondering if a guy like Cheatham, if a guy like Humphries, Rakocevic, who we've seen have some big games leading into the FIBA break, do they believe that they have an advantage in the big man stocks? Which, remember, we've asked questions with the Phoenix before. So it's how aggressive is this Phoenix defense going to be, which we believe is highly aggressive. And then what gaps does that open up, and can the Adelaide 36ers take advantage? Because that is an anomaly, that number there of shot attempts at the rim.
The first two games these teams played against each other, from memory, I think the 36ers tore the Phoenix up in the pick and roll. So again, it's a lot of Isaac Humphries rolling to the rim, a lot of Bryce Cotton creating. Now, teams have had a lot of success against the Phoenix by leveraging their pressure with their own force, right? So that the Phoenix pick up full court, you leverage that pressure, you get by them, you can sort of run in transition. Now, it feels like the Phoenix lately want teams to do that. They want you to, they don't want you to play fast, they want you to play rushed. And I think a lot of teams have this knack of getting by guys. All right, cool, we've got past the first line of defense. And then it's, all right, quick, oh, there's an opening here. We're going to shoot the shot. And it's a rush shot. So I think that the 36ers are a unique team in that I don't know if they'll fall into that trap, because while you look at their roster and you think, man, there are some interesting athletes on this team. Obviously, Bryce Cotton, Zylan Cheatham, Isaac Humphries is a good rim runner, Flynn Cameron. They're not a fast team. They don't run. They're maybe up there with Tasmania as the slowest team in the league. So I don't think this 36ers team is one that's going to get by that first line of defense and then get rushed into shots. I think they're going to get by that first line of defense and then settle things, be a bit poised and run their offense and try to get Bryce the ball. So I'm curious if the 36ers are even going to be affected too much by the ball pressure outside of maybe a turnover here or there. I think they're going to leverage it, get over half court, and then slow the pace down like they used to. Because, again, I don't think they want to facilitate the Phoenix's running game. Because, again, the 36ers is not a team that wants to play fast. They play very, very slowly. Think of how many times rebound. Where's Bryce Cotton? It's not on an outlet. It's not on an advance. It's Bryce Cotton circling back to get the ball so he can meander up the floor and so then he can get the ball again. So I'm curious of what the pace of this game looks like. And if the Phoenix, like the last two games they played, try to sort of run them out the gym, get quick shots up, and play at the pace that they want to play at and make Adelaide's slow style of basketball feel obsolete because they can't get enough points on the board.
It's interesting when you talk about pace and all those types of things. At one point, I remember talking to a coach and just asking about that, about offense and shot clock and when do you take the shots. And the word that they just kept coming back to was control. It's like, okay, you can play fast, but if you're not playing in control, then it's going to be bad offense. And so I think it will be interesting. I think it's a great point that you make. And I think this Adelaide team, if you look at the games this year, they haven't necessarily been high scoring, which is fascinating. Though I think in the back half of the season, the Phoenix, I think defensively probably dropped a little bit. And Josh King referenced that. He came on Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops last week, and he said that. He said during the FIBA break, I was like, hey, we can be a really powerful offense. That we can't neglect the defensive side of the ball. So it looked like they were pretty locked in for that Perth game, but the personnel is different for this Adelaide team. I was speaking to a coach in the league in the last couple of days, Olgun, and I asked them for their pick for the title, and they said the Phoenix. It seems to me that this Phoenix team has a lot of respect around the league, and there is confidence building that they can do something special here. I would still pick Adelaide to win the series. I think they'll reset. I like the talent. I think they'll lock in, but it feels like that might actually be an unpopular pick right now, which is hard to believe.
That's interesting. I think it's because the Sydney Kings have stretched their lead as far as how dominant they've been. But man, I spoke to a player, an Illawarra Hawks player, in the second week of the season. I think the Phoenix were 2-1 at that point, and this Illawarra Hawks player said, "Oh, they're us from last year. That's what the Phoenix are. They look like us in the way that they're able to put points on the board, score the ball in different ways, and defend with a level of energy, and then push the pace based on it." So we've seen an example of this sort of team winning. Again, again, I don't know how you feel. It feels like we're trending toward a collision course between the Phoenix and the Kings, and I think that would be a thoroughly entertaining series. But I think a team that has someone like Bryce Cotton on it, who is experienced in these moments, you speak about having control. I think arrested Bryce Cotton against this team. I don't think he's going to let the Phoenix's ball pressure affect him too much. I think he's going to continue to play at his own pace, no matter what the Phoenix give them. And I think that would be my advice for the 36ers. Don't frame this entire series around, man, the Phoenix are going to do this, so how do we respond? The 36ers also have to be proactive about the things that they're really good at, which is Bryce Cotton. They have shooting on the floor, and they have mobile, creative bigs who can do some stuff in a half court. So this is the closest. I think the Phoenix win this series, but I think it'll be close. And game one's interesting. Again, 3-game series. Bryce Cotton can go and have a 40-piece, and they can, I say, steal game one at home. I think the 36ers have a chance at taking game one.
Yeah, I would still pick Adelaide if you're really asking me to do a pick. I think it probably goes 3 games. I still think we're going to get Sydney and Adelaide, but part of that is because, I'm stubborn, Ox, and I said Adelaide would win the title months ago, so I'm not changing that right now. I also just the storyline. Like, if you're telling me that we know Bryce has struggled against Sydney, and we know how great he is, and I kind of want to see him in a championship series over 5 games go, if he was able to overcome that, the struggles during the regular season will be a great story. I think those teams don't like each other. There's just so much more there that I would love to see Sydney and Adelaide, but the Phoenix are a team that if they got to a championship series and put themselves with a chance to win a title, it would be one of the best stories we've seen in recent years, up there with Tasmania, really, when you consider the way that this roster has changed and Josh King coming in and everything he's done. So both teams, pretty easy to get excited for if they go ahead and win this series, but I think it's going to be awesome. And the Phoenix also had the bragging rights, Olgun, in Melbourne. They're like, that's right. We're in the Final Four. United, pack it up, go on your holidays. You're done. And this was one of the most remarkable downfalls we've seen in season that I can remember. If we go back to December 1, this Melbourne team is 13-2. They've got the number 1 offense, the number 1 defense, and a net rating of plus 13. From December 2 onwards, 7-11, the number 9 offense, from number 1 to number 9. They were number 3 defense, still they were fine. Net rating minus 2.5. So in the space of pre-December 1 to post-December 1, they got over 15 points worse per 100 possessions. They went from an all-time dominant-looking team to literally one of the worst teams in the league. The only teams worse than them were the Cairns Taipans and Brisbane Bullets, who were historically... We don't even want to talk about them anymore, and I shouldn't have even brought them up. The NBL26, Cairns Taipans and Brisbane Bullets, they are done for. What are they going to do? Because this does feel like a definitive point where what we've seen from Melbourne United, the best run organization in the league, now has some serious questions about what they're going to look like next year.
They're in a really awkward situation. And I think the final game of the season could act as a catalyst for the specific change that we might see. So that final game. So you got to think they entered this season with Shea Illy pegged in as their starting point guard. That's what they looked like. They had Chris Golding as someone who was going to start for them. And you get to the final game of the season, this playing game, and Shea Illy plays 4 minutes because I don't think he re-aggravated a hamstring injury, but he felt tightness, and so they couldn't play him. And that was a hamstring injury that he re-aggravated 3 or 4 times over the course of the season. And then Chris Golding was dealing with a knee injury. They mentioned he had a cyst in the back of his knee. I think it's a Baker's cyst. It's not uncommon, but it's something that obviously hindered him significantly. And again, you can put aside the fact that I think Dean Vickman just should have played Tanner Krebs. I think he should have just seen the writing on the wall and said, hey, Chris isn't giving it to us today. Let's lean into Tanner. He didn't do that. But I think those two things will be a catalyst for, all right, can we lean on Shea Illy as a starter level player for us? Can we lean on Chris Golding as a starter level player for us? Or are we going to get to this point in the season again and those guys are going to falter? They're not going to be durable. And we're going to look like we have egg on our face because we haven't prepared for this. So I think all of those things means that, again, I don't think they're off the team, but I think you have to designate different roles for those guys in the chance that, one, you can keep them durable throughout a season, and two, at that point in the season, you're not fully relying on them for the production that they did in the past because, again, Father Time is undefeated. And then there's a question of Dean Vickerman and what his future looks like. Now, all of the smoke remains that Asia is a consideration for him. There's Asian interest in him, particularly in Japan. He has an interest in going to Japan. So that is a consideration. Will he be there? And then if he is not there, then who? And this team, again, they're a unique team in that they're very well run. They're a team in a big city. They are probably the most sought after team. If you're a coach looking for a job in the NBL, that's the job that you want because you know that you'll have a reasonable budget to work with and you have a facility and sort of a structure that was built by Dean Vickerman. And he gets a lot of credit for that. And so where they go from a coaching standpoint, what direction they go from a personnel standpoint in the world after Chris Golding and Shea Illy, they're the main things that we're looking at.
Do you think they would potentially look to Japan if their head coach goes to Japan for a replacement?
So the other bit of smoke, Kane,
Thank you.
Is Trevor Gleeson is eyeing a return to the NBL. And from what we're hearing right now, Melbourne United will potentially have an opening. And there are also some coaches who are watching the Adelaide 36ers. And the Adelaide 36ers have a player named Bryce Cotton, who Trevor Gleeson still has a really good relationship with. And Trevor Gleeson had a lot of success coaching that guy, and that guy had a lot of success winning under Trevor Gleeson. And so, again, I won't be disrespectful and say it's a foregone conclusion that Adelaide will have a new head coach. But coaches around the world who are looking at the NBL and thinking that's where I want to coach, they're looking at the 36ers as a potential landing spot. And they're just waiting until a potential outcome, either good or bad, happens over there because, hey, that'd also be a good team to coach. That's also a team that's willing to spend a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, we've chatted with Trev. He came on Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops a couple of months ago now, and he at least said in his words, he goes, I would love to finish my coaching career in the NBL. And he said, hey, maybe it'll be next year. We've discussed, Trev. I know Brisbane is, via your reporting, I believe you reported this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but Brisbane at least asked the question. And, I said the whole time that I think if Trev's going to come back to the NBL, he's not coming to an organization where he has to build the whole thing from scratch. He wants to come to an organization that gives him a chance to win and is well set up. And, Melbourne is that if it comes down to this. The other question I have with the roster, this was a very different look Melbourne team to what we've seen in the past. So they went with 3 imports. That hasn't necessarily been their MO in the past. I would say that the results were pretty questionable. Now, part of that was because, as you pointed to, Shea Illy and Chris Golding. But also, if you just think in the last 6 years, the guys that they've had from Jack White, Daly, who they didn't want to sign for multiple years. They understand perhaps the reasoning why, but you would say that didn't really work out. Jock Landale was there. Luke Travers was there. JLA was there. So they have been a team that hasn't had to worry about bringing in imports because they have built their system and built the rock of their roster around local guys. So I guess the question will be, would they be willing, and if Dean's not there, this probably changes, so it's a little bit in flux, I'm sure, but would they want to go back to 3 imports, or do they try and get a guy like Duop Reith, or bring Luke Travers back, or well, Patty Mills would be a long shot, but Patty Mills, I don't know. Are they going to go back to that style of basketball that served them so well in the past? And let's not forget, this is a team now that you look at over the last 3 years and say that you got nothing out of it. Probably could have, should have, say what you want, won the last 2 titles. They didn't get them, and this is why it hurts you. Now they're out of the semifinals.
Yeah, it's too early to say which direction they'll go because we don't know who'll be running that team. Dean Vickerman has been the head coach. He's also been the GM of that team. He's made the basketball decisions, the roster decisions. So if he's gone, we don't know the philosophy, the identity of whomever is going to take over. But yes, they've had success. And the reason they can have success going local as far as the top-end talent, the core of that team, is because a lot of locals do want to be in Melbourne. They work out at Hoop City anyway. And so they have the advantage of the facility and just the big city being in Melbourne. A lot of guys live there. A lot of guys want to exist there. So they have the advantage of being able to do that if they want to. And that's another advantage because these are players you can marquee, you pay less tax. It's easier to rely on these guys who are known commodities in the NBL, whereas you bring in someone like Tyson Walker, who at his best is extremely talented. But there was some teething. There was some ebbs and flows with the way he played. The same with Jesse Edwards. He started off excellent, and then there was a drop-off, and then there were ups and downs. So relying on imports, especially young imports, to be the crux of your roster is a little bit scary. If you're a team like the Phoenix, for example, who I think they endeavored to go young with their imports, but ended up just going old anyway, it's okay if you go young because you have Nathan Sobey, you have Jordan Hunter, you've got Angus Glover, you have these guys who've been there before, you have Owen Foxwell. You can throw, for example, if they threw in a Tyson Walker and a Jesse Edwards or whatever, you can make that work because you do have the crux of a roster. The United's roster was unfortunately aging to the point where you weren't necessarily going to get that level of production that you got last year. And again, a lot of that issues, Chris Golding was a 30% three-point shooter this year on volume. He was a just under 40% shooter last season on volume, scoring 18 points a game. He's one of the best players in the league. So a significant drop-off there on top of inconsistent imports. It was a recipe for disaster, unfortunately, for United toward the end of the season. But yeah, it feels like, and then Tanner Krebs is the other one. He's a free agent. He's extremely sought after across the NBL. Does he stay? Is there a sour taste in his mouth after this? Would a new coach change that? I don't know, but it does feel like we could potentially have a pretty substantial overhaul in United.
It's going to be very interesting, Melbourne United fans. What do you want? What went wrong this season in the last couple of months? Let us know there, and we'll see. It would be so weird if Dean Vickerman wasn't there. I assume Chris Golding will be back. He came into the season injured, so I'm hopeful that he just gets fresh in the offseason, comes back, and he's the previous 2 seasons, you could argue, where he's 2 best in the NBL. So he does turn 38 in October, but we'll see what happens with Chris Golding there. But could be weird times ahead for Melbourne United, a very different look team. We'll see what happens there. Keep an eye on all Olgun's work at espn.com.au. But it is time for StatMate Streak Watch. Download StatMate for all your NBA hot stats completely free. And we haven't had much time to talk about the NBA. It's NBL playoff time. But let's talk about Dyson Daniels. So how is this for a stat? If you like unique, some would say niche. Not me. I'm not discrediting it, Olgs. Stats. Dyson Daniels, he became the 4th youngest player in NBA history, as tweeted out by the Atlanta Hawks, to have 2K points, 1K rebound, 1K assists, 450 steals. He joins LeBron James, Magic Johnson, Chris Paul. Now, the Steel's doing some heavy lifting here.
Good list. Great list.
The Steel's are doing some heavy lifting, but Dyson Daniels, anytime you're in company like that, you got to tip your hat, man. And I've said it time and time again here. I think Dyson's season has been probably unfairly criticized, largely because of the 3-point shooting. He's really struggled. We understand that. I mentioned asking Ryan Brokoff questions about shooting and coming in injured and how does it affect you. And he seems to believe that he just needs to reset in the offseason and hopefully he comes back. He was over 30% last year, so it's just been a disaster and hasn't got better. But the Hawks team's cooking a little bit here. They've won 6 in a row. They're 2 games over 500, only 2.5 out of the 6 seeds. So they're finally starting to look a little bit like the team we thought they could be, albeit a couple of the key pieces we thought might be there are no longer there. But Dyson, unfairly criticized, man. He's had a he's a decent season.
And he's been putting up good numbers over this stretch as well. The Hawks have been winning games of late.
Yeah.
He's the ultimate connective point guard on both ends of the floor, and that's what he needs to be. And he doesn't need to shoot 10 threes a game. And I agree with you. It's been unfairly criticized. The production, I think, is there anyway. The impact is there, and if they continue to win games, feels like they're on like a Hornetsy, maybe not the same level, but like they're on a bit of a rise while other teams are choosing to lose on purpose. The Hawks feel like they might end up being a thing toward the end of the season, and Dyson Daniels is a big part of that. And I like the fact that the amount of times that we see Josh Giddey and then Oscar Robertson and LeBron James and all these names whenever he has the triple-double. I like that we're seeing some of these Hall of Fame level names in the same conversation as Dyson Daniels. This is a great development.
It's awesome. And, he signed the $100 million contract, which is obviously life-changing money. But, I think we expect that the offensive game will continue to improve, and certainly the facilitation, the assist numbers are through the roof. But I'm not sure how many people out there view Dyson as a guy that's going to average 25, 26, 27 points at any stage in his career. That doesn't mean that he's not a highly impactful NBA player. He's already proven it. And those numbers there, as we said, a lot of steals. Obviously, last year with a historic year, numbers down a little bit in that category, but still up there in deflections. And Fatessa, our producer, gave us some stat last week, and I guess I read it out wrong. But deflections, or she might put it in the chat. It was something, but
it wasn't
either
deflections.
Either way, he's very disruptive. So he's having a good season. But that's his StatMate Streak Watch,
and he's earning this contract. I know you got to finish the sponsored segment. Like it's a lot of money. I get it. He's not shooting it well, but he's earned the contract thus far. He's warranting that amount of money. And as Fatessa says in the chat, loose balls recovered. What a stat.
Thank you very much. And once again, apologies to you, Fatessa, who, you somehow put this show together. You're dealing with, Olgun's very professional, but you're also going to deal with me on a weekly basis. Fatessa is out here in Bristol, so I see her every day, and she's probably absolutely sick of me, which I think everyone watching and listening to this podcast would totally understand. But download StatMate to play more or less. Just make 5 player predictions daily for your chance to win $1,000. Olgun, let's wrap this thing up. We're really excited. I know you've got this game tonight. Everything on ESPN, nothing but net Aussie hoops. That'll be on Thursday night. So we'll have both of those game ones done and dusted. I think we're going to have some guests from the winners. So we'll see who that might be. But any tidbits for the end of this show? This is what the people love. This should really be the sponsored segment. Maybe like, I don't know, like Snickers, Olgun's. I got to be careful here. Olgun, what do you got?
So I'm just opening my I have a notes thing where I put all of the things that I hear. Now look, I mentioned keep an eye on the Gleason stuff. Trevor Gleason has a desire to come back to the NBL. Melbourne will, I think, likely be there, and that is something that I think he'll have interest in. And Adelaide is one that I know for sure he has interest in. And I am, from what I feel, the interest would be mutual, but the 36ers are not jumping the gun. They haven't made decisions yet. That's one to look at. I reported last week with KD that Modi Mayor is someone that the New Zealand Breakers are looking at. They're eyeing him. He has other offers. He has, I know there's a Euro Cup team that has interest in him. Nagasaki wants to keep him. They're negotiating with him, but the Breakers want him. And like I said, Modi Mayor enjoyed his time in New Zealand and in the NBL. So I wouldn't completely rule that out. That is a possibility. Outside of that, keep an eye on some of the players who are going overseas. Josh Bannon just signed in Italy. Keep an eye out. It feels like Nick Marshall may also be headed to Italy, potentially to a team in a city that's known for its sources. So keep an eye out on some of the player movement of the NBL guys. It also sounds like Dave Hickey might be G League bound, but we'll see.
You just made me think of it. So it should be like, I don't know what the rules are about just mentioning companies that aren't actually putting any money into this podcast, but like it could be The Source with Olgun Ulich presented by Heinz or something like that. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Yeah.
Something about sources. I was going to say something about Snickers and nuts, but then I was like, don't bring that up, mate. That's like, there's a real pause moment. People don't want to talk about that. But either way, people get very excited about the news tidbits at the end of the show.
Well, look, this is something for our overlords at Disney to put together. Bring us a sponsor, bring us a source sponsor, and I will bring sources to the table.
We love it. All right. That was the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Get involved in the show. Lots to discuss between the semi-final series, Melbourne United, the playing tournament in general, and of course, Dyson Daniels there as well. So it was good to be back with you, Olgun. Appreciate you. ESPN.com.au for all the latest news for him. So thanks to everyone for listening to this show. Thanks to Fatessa for putting up with us and putting together this masterpiece yet again. And we will be back next week.